Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, we're working with your department to increase investments in energy security, digital security, economic growth, strategic infrastructure, and your workforce. Given the difficult cut of FY24, a 5% cut, and that FY25 will likely again be a very challenging overall budget environment, any increased investments you will have the chance to do will likely come at the expense of other efforts. What are some examples of what you'll have to scale back and the impact of doing so if your budget is not increased?
Look, first and fundamentally, there are some huge trade-offs that we'd have to bring to bear on some of the big strategic issues that we're working on. So if we have to look at how do we do the trade-off between funding for strategic ports and transportation projects that we're engaged in, for example, the Luzon corridor in the Philippines, for example, the Libido corridor in Africa, that's critical. But at the same time, can we do that and then continue to fund the necessary programs to counter Russian aggression against Ukraine? What about our ability to meet all of the global challenges that, again, are going to have inevitably an impact back home: irregular migration, fentanyl, pandemic preparedness, food security? As we've looked at it, we would have to make fundamental trade-offs among these big-ticket items. But let me be even a little bit more parochial. What does it actually mean if we're dealing with a world in which we have a 5% cut, or as some in the House have proposed, an 11% cut? We are going to have to reduce passport and consular services that we've managed to build back after COVID. We have plans to open new passport centers in this country. They would stall out, and that would be to the detriment of the ability of Americans to travel around the world, see family, do business, get an education. We would have to decrease the embassy security programs that we have. We're trying to add new posts so that we're present around the world. Not only would we have trouble adding those posts, we'd also have to look at cutbacks to security for existing posts. And even if we were to insulate that particular program, well, those reductions would get passed on to everything else.
You were recently in Ukraine, and you forcefully underscored the message that the United States continues to stand with Ukraine. And as I said, I'm grateful for the leadership of the chair and vice chair, and finally delivering on critical and needed assistance. That additional security and economic and humanitarian assistance needs to be delivered as soon as possible. You mentioned in your opening statement, for every dollar that we've delivered in terms of economic and development assistance, our partners have delivered $3. I'd just be interested in how you're continuing to engage partners and allies in ensuring that they're continuing to contribute, in fact, exceeding our contributions, and what you see as the prospects for the year ahead in Ukraine.
Well, first, I have to tell you that thanks to leadership here in getting the supplemental done, that was the biggest difference maker, practically speaking, in Ukraine, as that assistance is now getting delivered, but also in making sure that we keep our allies and partners moving forward with us in making the necessary investments for Ukraine to continue to defend against the Russian aggression. But also this, to set Ukraine up in a way that, as I believe strongly, it will be a success. Militarily, economically, democratically, able to stand strongly on its own feet without the same level of investment that we've had to make in these few years. We have programs underway in each of those areas, and you can see the single best rebuke to Putin is a strong, successful, thriving Ukraine. We have the means now to make the necessary investments to do that. Our partners remain fully on board, but again, the supplemental was a big shot in the arm, both for Ukraine and European and other partners on this.
Thank you. Since the horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7th, I've strongly supported Israel's right to defend itself. Like many of my colleagues, I am also deeply concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which has become more dire in recent weeks given operations and the threat of further operations in Rafah. What are you seeing in terms of assistance and the delivery of humanitarian relief? What impact is the new pier having in Gaza that's been constructed by the United States? What diversion are you seeing by Hamas of assistance we're delivering? What diversion are you seeing by Israeli settlers and other protesters? And what do you think is the prospects for some positive path forward for a day after in Gaza?
People of Gaza, children, women, and men are experiencing a humanitarian crisis. Food, water, medicine, shelter, all remain in far too short supply. We've been working on this from day one. to try to get the necessary access to Gaza so that supplies could get in, to try to get adequate distribution within Gaza, to try to get proper deconfliction so the humanitarians can go about their work safely and securely. And this remains absolutely essential work that we're at every single day. In recent weeks, we've made important progress because of openings of access points in the north, because North Gaza was particularly aggrieved. But now we see the situation to some extent reversed because of the conflict taking place in and around Rafah. Those access points, Rafah itself, as well as to some extent Kerem Shalom, have either been shut down or not operating at full capacity. So we have that challenge, and it's imperative that those access points be fully operational. At the same time, even as we've seen progress in getting Erez open, in getting the route from Jordan moving with trucks, those trucks have been disrupted in Israel by protesters, and that it's imperative that stop and be brought to order so the trucks can move freely. We did have a convoy yesterday that went through without impediment. In Gaza itself, there remain problems of deconfliction with the humanitarians. It's better at a sort of strategic level. There are good procedures in place, but we continue to see some problems at the operational level, at the tactical level, where a given unit may not know in real time that a convoy is supposed to go through. So we're working on significantly improving that, finally fixing that to make sure that humanitarians can proceed safely. Getting designated corridors, if necessary, designated times, getting real-time communication between those providing the assistance and those on the ground who are engaged in military activities. All of this is a day-in, day-out work in progress, but we have to do better by the people of Gaza.
Thank you. I want to thank Senator Graham and Senator Cardin, led, as you know, a bipartisan delegation of 10 of us to the region right after October 7th. You've been working tirelessly to try and move forward some sort of reconciliation between the Saudis and Israelis, and I hope we'll get a chance to turn to that.